All right, our second topic today. We wanted to discuss. We saw, in the past week or so, Jack Smith filed a very large motion, and what it goes into is trying to make the case in light of the recent Supreme Court precedent, their opinion that for official acts, presidents should be immune from prosecution. It's only for unofficial acts that they could be prosecuted for. And so Jack Smith, all of the cases that had been brought against former President Trump, had been put in peril with this because you have to decide, okay, well, what of the stuff he was doing was official acts versus unofficial acts? Was paying off, Stormy Daniels, a official act or not? Was trying to get the overturn an election an official act or not? And so Jack Smith lays out in detail what he would argue are the unofficial acts involved in trying to overturn the election. And a lot of evidence was presented in this. There's a lot of revelations. They have access to his phone, access to his Twitter, and then they have eyewitness accounts, as far as things that were said and so forth. And he lays all this out for the judge to try to put forth, okay, well, here's the stuff that, based on the Supreme Court precedent, he could still be prosecuted for. So, needless to say, this was, there's a lot of headline grabbing things. I'm sure if you're watching this, you've seen some of the things come across. And so, part of this discussion, though, we want to discuss the reaction to it or lack thereof, and just to kind of, kick us off here, was there anything in the filing that was particularly notable to you or stood out to you or that kind of just either made you chuckle or made you pull your hair out or anything like that?
Those watching the YouTube video, let's leave the joke about my hair aside. No, that's the interesting part, James. I would say it's nothing really new. There was nothing earth-shattering to me that was like, wow, I didn't know this. I would say it just served as a good reminder. I think, for me, it was a good reminder of the level of detail about Mike Pence. I don't think this is new information. I think it was a little bit new to me that Donald Trump didn't know that the threat on Mike Pence's life. I was a little bit, and then before he made the tweet that Pence didn't have courage. So that one to me was a new one, but I don't think that was new kind of for just the main information. But I will say it was just a reminder, James, with the level of information kind of cross currents because of everyone fighting, or let's say both Democrats and Republicans fighting for the narrative as we have an election just a few weeks away here. It was a good reminder of the projection of voter fraud. This idea with the fake electors, and the lady recently, Tina Peters, who was, who's the scene in court with the judge became a bit of a big deal on the news recently. That's what it reminded me of, is this projection of having to hear about voter fraud and that just it being focused on one side, that it's all the Democrats letting in these illegal immigrants to vote. And again, language being important, focusing on how Donald Trump always says, and the Republicans always say, they had a record number of voters in 2020, 70 something million. And I love how Kamala Harris reminded voters during the only debate they had that he was fired by 83 million Americans. So again, it's this idea. That's what it reminded me of wow, this elector scheme was really a true attempt at a coup, a true attempt to overthrow voters in these states and just the votes, and saying like, no, even though Joe Biden won this state, we're going to make up the fact that he lost and try and get the vice president of the United States to sign off on it. And so, it's just a reminder. So it's nothing new, but it's like, wow, okay, this was serious.
Yeah, and you bring up the Tina Peters piece, which is the lady in Colorado that was just convicted, dealing with all the schemes related to trying to flip this 2020 election. And yes, it is that reminder as far as the project. Like, hold up, there's only one group of people that keeps getting caught for election fraud and doing all funny stuff with the election, and that's the Republicans. Yet they're the ones who constantly talk about the other side is going to do this and going to do that. And it's like, we see why this is on your mind, because this is what you guys are trying to do. You just assume that anybody would do it.
It's like a cheater in a relationship that keeps blaming the other person.
Exactly, because they can't imagine a world where somebody wouldn't. So, but no, like the thing that stood out to me the most actually was how far the extent to which they were like that Trump was willing to go to overturn the election, on top of the fact that he didn't go all the way through with it, or that he didn't pull it off, because like the idea, that you're looking at it like, okay, Trump says, the eyewitness account says Trump tells his daughter and son-in-law, it doesn't matter if you won or lost the election, you have to fight like hell. All right, so he's saying that, and that's what they did, and it's just like, well, it seems like at a certain point, once you get down far enough down this road, there's just no way that you're going to stop. So to me, the thing that surprised me the most is seeing all of this stuff that was done that they during this time period, from November to January, and that he actually did leave in January. Like I'm just surprised because it seemed like he was going down a road where it was like, yo, I'm not leaving. Like that's what it seemed like he was doing.
Yeah.
And he did, so I like that part is to me is just like, okay, well, what happened? Because surely people from November to January were trying to talk sense into him the whole time. They didn't just say, hey, on the 20th, like, hey man, you got to go. Like, so he didn't listen to them that whole time. And then he got to the point, like Biden's getting inaugurated. Like, all right, I'm not going to try to disrupt the inauguration. I'm just going to go. And so that to me, that was the part to me that kind of just, I was just surprised of how far he was willing to go. But then, that he didn't go all the way.
You know what it speaks to, and I'm sorry that, like, I don't mean to be mean to the guy because, I want to respect everybody, but it speaks to literally his incompetence at everything.
The guy who loses money in casinos. The only guy.
Except for being a great con man and sales, a snake oil salesman type. But no, because it's even his incompetence at being a dictator. Because as you said it, like, no, but it's like, as you said it, it's like that he won't leave. Like, I'm thinking about what just happened in Venezuela with Nicolas Maduro.
Yeah, that's a great example.
He was like, man, nah, I won this thing. And he just didn't.
He said he won. He pulled the Trump, and then he was like, all right.
Yeah.
And
he's
then
like, no, y'all come get me. Yeah. He's like, y'all come get me, man. And the thing is, but think about it. That's why I say he's incompetent about being a dictator. Because we talked about this privately. Like when Putin got in office or any of these guys, what do? The first thing they do is they clear the playing field of opponents in any way they can. So if Trump was serious, he would have locked Hillary up in 2016, 2017, or after he won in 2017. He would have been doing all that. He wouldn't have left in 2020. And also, think about it. He wouldn't be showing up to court sitting in trial. You think Vladimir Putin was sitting in trial in Russia? Hell no. So my point is
to me, but I mean, no, that's kind
what I
of
mean by
me.
It's weird because that's what makes it. Yeah, it's a half step of being a dictator and then a half step of running a democracy. It's weird.
But that actually pertains to the idea of, okay, well, so getting a second bite at the apple, I wonder what that would mean. Like then
I just think it'd be chaotic, man.
How is that lesson learned, basically, to say, oh, I should have never, somebody walk away saying I should have never left because now I got to deal with all this other stuff? I don't know. But that's to me what stood out.
I get the feeling that. Oh, go ahead. Yeah,
no, I just want to, the idea that, like the reaction to the public, it particularly, like I would say, people who are in the camp of Donald Trump, by and large, seems to suggest that like there is, no matter what, there is bad and unethical behavior that's described in this evidence. Not argument, but actual evidence. And so, and we're seeing that this doesn't really move the needle. And obviously, as you pointed out, a lot of this stuff, the general strokes of this stuff, we kind of knew already anyway. Like this adds more specificity. Like, oh well, like you said, the timing of like he hears Pence's life may be in danger, and then he says something else, publishes something else that to amp people up against Pence, and it's like, well, hey man, what are you trying to accomplish there? Like that.
So I realized why Pence didn't endorse him. I was like, yeah, Pence knows a lot more than we know.
Yeah, exactly. Like there's timing things and little things like that, but and on the flip side, like the people that are out of Trump's camp or not in Trump's camp, it's like preaching to the choir to them. They're like, yeah, this is all the reasons why we're not. Well, for many of them, this is why we're not here. So, do you think, like the idea that Trump has normalized bad behavior, meaning the people who are against bad behavior are already against him, and the people who are with him have decided that bad behavior, for whatever reason, is either they're not going to believe it or they're going to like it's all a scheme against him, or the other side is so bad, the accusations against the other side are so bad that the proof against their side is not enough for them to change their mind. Like for politicians in America, by and large, like, do you think this is bigger than Trump potentially, where bad behavior is condoned and like this is just, you're just on a side, you pick a camp or it's the good behavior, or it's the side that is against bad behavior and the side that's okay with bad behavior. Like, what do you think is happening here from a big picture standpoint?
I
Because
don't know, man. It's
prosecutors presenting evidence, you would think in many respects would have some effect. Again, even more effect than just news reports, but actual evidence of stuff.
I don't know, man. I think it's just very difficult to tell because of all the cross currents in our information landscape. I mean, it's even hard to tell really what the polls are and what's real and what's not. I saw something this morning where Harris is up 11% to Trump, and that doesn't seem realistic. And then there's others that say that it's tied, So I think the election will say a lot. I think that if it's a landslide on the popular vote, no matter how the electoral college goes, that'll tell you, at least the general public, how effective this stuff is or not. And if it's a close race, it'll tell us a lot as well, And so it's, but I do think you're right. I think there's a part of it that is the ecosystem stuff that if more people got exposed just to what it is, on both sides, they'd probably look at it different. But I do think there is a healthy amount of, because it's been now almost a decade of not only Trump, but remember, we now have a generation of culture wars. And we actually have 30 years, for people that really are into politics, going back to the class of 94 with Newt Gingrich, of really winner take all combat politics. And so, yeah, I think there is a certain
Well, I
part
think
of the
it's always been
electorate.
winner take all, but I think it's more you maybe like no holds barred would
Yeah,
be a better
maybe that's
kind
a
of
better way to say it. But
yeah.
yeah, like really attacking your fellow American politician like they're actually an adversary from a foreign country. I mean, that's what we saw starting in the
Well, like
'90s.
they're worse than an
Yeah,
adversary from a foreign country, honestly.
and so no, but I think so. So I do think there's a part of the electorate that will just say the other side is so bad that no matter what my side does, I don't care. But I think the well's been poisoned. I think all the attacks on the media have been very effective. So there's a lot of people that just don't want to believe anything that doesn't come out of their trusted messengers, and I
Phil,
think
Phil
that's why.
Jackson, Phil Jackson, former coach of the Chicago Bulls and Los Angeles Lakers, famous for working the refs, would be very proud.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
and
you're right.
so
The well has been poisoned.
yeah, yeah. And
With many
so I
respects.
think, and this is why we saw, I mean, that's why that things like the Dominion lawsuit, where you saw the text between host of Fox evening shows that they didn't believe what they were telling their own people on the show. And I think that speaks to a certain level of rot, I mean, in our culture. And that's why these are things that you can't legislate. I'm not saying we got to regulate things and all that, but clearly we have the culture of journalism, media, and the respect for truth and transparency has gone. And I think we're at a very interesting inflection point. I do think something happened between the attack on the Haitian migrants in Springfield, not just because it's attack on the Haitians. I don't think that was it. I think a lot of people were disgusted by the disruption it caused the city of Springfield, more so than just the attack on the Haitians. And I think
Yeah.
this is what I want to get your thoughts on. I thought about this in
Well,
preparing today. I think that what we're seeing currently, right now in October of 2024, with the reaction to the hurricanes and the misinformation being spread by Donald Trump, let's call it that way, and the leadership on the Republican Party, some of them, and a contrast to the Republican governors and mayors who are beating against it. I think the public's really getting a chance to see and make a decision here.
I mean, maybe
You
they
know,
are, maybe they aren't. I mean, I think this is the significance of the culture wars. I mean, I think this is the power of the culture wars, is that you make these political battles about something other than truth, honesty, integrity, things like that. Like, it's not about if you're engaged in a culture war, then your guy telling lies or your guy doing stuff that's bad or unethical is not really that important. That's just the general in the war, and you guys still gotta take that position. You still gotta fight this battle, and so you're not gonna abandon if you're fighting a war for real, and you find out that your general was screwing around on his wife. You're not gonna stop following that general. It's like, yo, we still gotta, I don't have him in place. He's not my general leading me in battle because he's a good husband. He's there because I want to follow this person in the battle. So I think the significance of the culture wars and keeping people engaged in the idea that what they're fighting for is something bigger than than having truth and integrity in government is where this come or where how we see this manifested. And what we see actually in many respects is how far like people are willing to take this, and when you talk about the claims that were made about the Haitian migrants that were demonstrably false, or even with like you got Republican Congressman Marjorie Taylor Greene talking about that throwing out that the Democrats are controlling the path of hurricanes, like stuff that to most rational, reasonable people is like laughable. It's like this person couldn't be serious, but she's serious, and like that's saying how far can we take this stuff? How far can we go in saying things that an observer who has some level of perspective would be like, yo, I can't take this person seriously anymore that said this. But
Yeah.
if we have people engaged in these culture wars, then maybe that's what they're more so looking for. And so I do think you're right, though, that because the boundaries are being pushed right now, we are going to see in this election a lot. We're going to learn a lot because I even look at like the governor candidate in North Carolina, with the Mark Robinson, and the stuff can't stop coming out about this guy. And again, it's just about the character of the person. And so I'm old school in this sense, in that I think that the character of the person is probably the most important thing when you're voting in a system, voting in a system like ours, because you can't go based on just their platform, because you need people that can react to changing circumstances. Like, oh, okay, we're going to do this. We're going to put this tax code in. We're going to do that. And it's like, well, okay, that's all well and good when nothing bad happens. But what are you going to do? What kind of person are you when things go bad? Are you the kind of person that brings people together, that gets the best out of people? Or are you the kind of person that points fingers and blames people? And so the character piece I'm looking at, but it does seem like if you feel like you're engaged in a culture war, character, integrity, that stuff doesn't matter, because all you're trying to do is take that next advance, and so forth.
Well, that's why this goes back to the role of the messengers in our current culture war, whether it be the cable news or the people controlling algorithms like Elon Musk, is to create such anxiety that people are just constantly in fight or flight. So they're not slowing down to think about certain things, and they're not able to be rational in their thought. And I think, James, that's why it's a good point.
Fight or flight is a good
and it's a good. This is why I do think this is interesting. I mean, this will play out. We're in the middle of it now, because we have this Hurricane Milton now coming and barreling down on Florida again, after Helene 2 weeks ago. But what does the public do with a leader like Donald Trump and certain people like a Marjorie Greene that make these outlandish assertions that Democrats are withholding aid, or that Democrats somehow can control the weather? Contrast to Republican mayors and people like their local elected officials who are of their party saying that's not true. FEMA and the federal government is helping us, and this and that. And you're right. I wonder how the population will respond to a contrast in leadership in our face, one that's trying to divide people at a time when a lot of people are hurting, and another that is not trying to divide people. And whether you want to say uniting or not, I'm not here to advocate for anyone, but it's just that they're not behaving like this type of division. So, I think we'll see that play out in the next few weeks in the election. But it's just interesting as you talk about Mark Robinson. I think that's such a great example of how this has spread to an entire political party, because it's not just Mark Robinson. The fish rots from the head. So I was reminded recently that Donald Trump's daughter-in-law, who was the head of the RNC during an election year, recently came out with a single, a pop song. I'm not sure what the purpose of spending your time on that when you were trying to win an election, but that's okay. Think about what's happened this year just from Trump. He sold sneakers. He sold a Bible. He sold NFTs. He sold trading cards of himself. And the most recent.
Hold on. Let me stop you real quick. You're better off listing the things he hasn't sold than trying to list all the things that he has.
Now, the point is, James, the reason I name all that is because these are things that I would have thought for most Americans would just be seen as bad faith and bad character of how you're even behaving in that role. Like
they
as
are.
a former
my
president,
point is that to the people that support him, bad character doesn't appear to matter.
Yeah, like that's my point. And so that's why I say it's bringing it, because it's bad character. That's what I mean that by the fish rots from the top is Well, he's behaving like a con artist, snake oil salesman, selling like cheap tchotchkes, to American. Like, this is a disgusting. Then, of course, guys like Mark Robinson creep in through the ether because there's no vetting. His daughter-in-law is the head of the RNC, so then no one's really vetting these people. And so, think about it. This was the logical conclusion because as you're talking about Mark Robinson, remember in 2018 there was a guy called Roy Moore who was running for Senate in Alabama.
Yeah.
The state of Alabama gave the senator seat to a Democrat for the first
Well,
time in our
that's
lifetimes.
after, but hold on. That's after Roy Moore won the Republican primary.
I know. A guy who was a
So,
pedophile.
yeah. And
So that's
another
the
guy,
point.
allegations could. So he won the Republican primary with all that about him, and then the state of Alabama,
Correct.
voted,
And
did
that's
not
what I'm
vote.
saying. So that's what I mean by this has become the logical conclusion of how the party has drifted into this since the Tea Party. Because this party didn't used to elect people like this, 20, 25 years ago.
Well, what
And
it
so,
is, well,
yeah,
what I was going to
sorry.
say is like what it is that on the Republican Party side, it seems like they've lost the ability to self-correct for these kinds of things. Like, and you look in the current environment, Nixon wouldn't resign. And so, but during that time, there was if bad behavior was done, you tried to get away with it. If you got caught, you kind of got caught, and your party members will come out and say, "Hey, man, we might have to cut loose of you so that we can keep the larger ship running." And like they weren't celebrating Iran Contra. It wasn't like, "Hey, yeah, we did it." Like
Yeah.
it was something. It was like, "Oh no, we got caught." Like it's so.
Yeah.
But that self-correcting mechanism has gone away, and maybe that's the design of Roger Ailes. Who said, like who saw a problem with what happened to Nixon and created Fox, and designed Fox News to be a solution to that, so to speak. But without the self-correcting aspect of it, to say, okay, when people step over a certain line, we as a political party have to say, hey, we don't. This doesn't represent the best of us. We need to go in a different direction. That's been lost or been broken. Like whatever you want to say, but that piece about it, because I don't know that this isn't a case where the people really can save when you're talking about from a political apparatus standpoint and a two main political parties, because you have one side or one party take all, winner take all elections. It's difficult to correct that just from the people, so to speak. Your political parties play an important role in that as gatekeepers, as vetting for stuff. And so that's just been that mechanism's been broken. And so we'll see what happens. But my concern moving forward is always just that I want to make sure that we're all doing the same thing here, and so are we trying to win elections so that we can have put in policies and so forth? Or are we trying to do this and we trying to punish the other side? Are we trying to, like, the rhetoric that I'm seeing, again, like talking about right now, 2024, the limits being pushed on all this stuff, saying, oh yeah, the Democrats are controlling the weather and they're trying to go kill people with, no, seriously, go kill people with
I know.
storms. Like, well, what's the rationale? If that's really true, you can easily get to a point where these people need to, like, these people are evil, Thanos
I
level
know.
evil, and if like this is the, so if we're going down this direction, I would hope that the country as a whole maintains this self-correcting mechanism that can say, okay, yeah, we can't reward electorally people who, again, will cast their political opponents, their fellow Americans, like in this way. Like, and my point overall being is, are we still doing the Constitution? Like, is that what we're still doing? Or have the culture wars overtaken the Constitution to where now some people have decided that by any means necessary, basically, is how they're going to operate from a political standpoint, because what they perceive as the other side being so evil, and weather making machines and all this other stuff, like Bond villain stuff,
Yeah.
is the stuff that's driving their political agenda.
Well, I think you're onto something, and I think you're right. This is how, the Third Reich turned into from, kind of a political thing into what it turned into. This is how Rwanda happened. This is how the Balkans happened in the 90s when we were kids, where it becomes where the people you just have a disagreement with or a philosophical, whatever with tete-a-tete with, actually become enemies, seen that they have to be literally just destroyed or exterminated.
Well,
So,
let me add, just people you
yeah,
have a disagreement with in the context of a constitution then become, what you're
yeah.
saying,
And
some kind
so,
of
and so,
enemy that needs to be vanquished.
yeah, and I think that's where maybe this is why I say we're in the middle of this now, so I can't tell how it's going to play out, but maybe these people are becoming so extreme in their rhetoric that maybe it's becoming enough that the majority of Americans will say, yeah, I don't know if someone can control the weather, all that. But I think the trap, and I want you to speak to this, James, because you get me off this intellectual ledge sometimes. Because when someone like a congresswoman says that Democrats control the weather, my intellectual brain kicks in, and then I start thinking about like the forest fires in California, for example. I go, well, if they're that good, how come they don't control that, right? In the Democratic state.
Well, but she
But you're
said they
very
did
good.
too. She
No,
said they
but
did. She said,
yeah, I
oh,
know
go ahead.
you're right. But you're good at saying like, because I think this is a trap a lot of people fall into, and I'm not to say only intellectual people that are smarter than, but I think when you're kind of have more of a rational mindset, you tend to think, oh, well, that's a stupid argument. Who would believe that? And then you wake up and you're surprised, or you're walking around in your community and there's people like, yeah, maybe people are eating other people's pets, or maybe there is
Yeah.
a way for someone to control the weather. And it goes back to like, I think about the contrails conspiracies. Like my brain says, oh, well, maybe planes flying very fast at 30,000 feet, the kind of the way that the metal starts shaking on the airframe creates heat and steam comes off the plane, and that's the contrail. Other people say, no, the government's spraying stuff in the air. So speak to that, James, because I think it's more of how do we, as people, maybe more rational minded people, help other people in our own community that are really on the fence about this? Because I'm really being serious. I don't like calling people stupid. I don't like making fun of people's intellect. I think that we have a responsibility, all of us in our society, when we see people that want to fall into believing that maybe a certain political party can control the weather. Instead of making fun of someone about that, we should actually have a different way of approaching. Say, no, you know what? Why don't you come in here? Let's have a conversation about this, and let's see. So, because you're good at telling me that sometimes, like, Tunde, stop using
talking you off the ledge.
Well, yeah, but like, stop using your rational mind. Like,
because
look at this
to
a different
some
way.
people, that is so far fetched. It's so far fetched that it's self disqualifying. Like, it's just like, okay, that's a person you cannot take seriously. No one would take it. So you go from that to then saying no one can take that person seriously. And that's the trap that you can't fall into, because things are complicated in the world. And so if people that other people trust, or that are on their side in a culture war, say certain things, if there's trust there, then people will willing, either whether they believe it or not, or whether they believe it in part, so to speak, where it's like, oh, okay, yeah, I kind of believe it, but like it raises some interesting question, or it puts them in a certain direction either way. Like, you have to make sure that, one, ridicule is not the way necessarily, but what you have to be able to do is understand that you're not the target audience for that. There is a target audience for that, of people that would be that's something that could be used to manipulate them or to sow doubt in them. And the goal is to further remove the people who are the target from society as a whole, from this whole American experiment that we're doing, where we have elections, we respect the results. The other side isn't the enemy. We get another shot at the election in 2 years or 4 years and so forth, trying to pull people out of that mindset and into this mindset of, we got to win. It doesn't matter if you win or lose. You just fight like hell. Like that's where they're trying to pull people in that mindset. And so the goal, honestly, is to try to keep people into the mindset where, hey, what we're doing here is Constitution, elections. You win some, you lose some. You share power. If the other side has the power, unfortunately, you let them do their thing. And then you go back at it in 2 years. So it's more about trying to keep people pulled in, not to you personally, but into this joint thing that we're doing called the U.S. Constitution. So, I think that's a big part of it. As far as when we hear things like this, is we can't dismiss it as being so obviously, because we're not the target audience, we can't dismiss it as being so obviously ridiculous that that this person can't be serious and no one could take them seriously, because that's just not the case. And I'm not saying that because I want that to be. I'm saying that because that's just what it is. And then you stack on top of it the information bubbles and so forth, and it actually becomes very dangerous.
And I think there's something that I didn't realize until.
But we got to. We got to.
No. I'll just finish on this. That I think we got to, all of us, be careful of projecting how we think onto other people. The fact that we might not believe that somebody can control the weather doesn't mean someone else can. And I'll leave with this last joke. As you're talking, it makes me think of the Harlem Globetrotters versus the Washington Generals. We don't want that in real life.
Yeah, for sure.
That'd be pretty boring.
No, for sure. So All right, well, but I think, we'll wrap up from there. We appreciate everybody for joining us on this episode of Call Like I See It. Subscribe to the podcast, rate it, review it, tell us what you think, send it to a friend. Check out part 1 as well. And until next time, I'm James Keys.
And I'm Tunde Ogunlana, waiting for that outro.
All right, here we go. We'll talk to you next time.